Welcome everybody, Steve here. Today, I've always had those questions, how do you weld the thin metal? And I've done it my whole life, and it's a tough process. I know a lot of welders that can't weld thin metal. It's almost an art. And I'm just going to show you a couple things that I do, that bring me success. And the whole idea of this video is just to give you some of my ideas, and hopefully they're going to help you. There's guys out on the YouTube that are really good at welding this thin metal up. And you just got to find what works best for you, for your machine, and for your application. And I love doing these videos for you. And hey, subscribe, it's free, really helps out the channel. So I can keep bringing you some of this information, whether it's useless or not. So this metal that I'm going to use today, I just cut this out of working on Project 56 Merc, and this is just a chunk of leftover that I cut off a panel. And it's only 20 gauge, so it's fairly thin stuff. I usually like to work with 18 gauge, but that's okay. Now, my welder, I've got a really old Miller Cricket welder. I think it's only 75 amps. It's a very small little welder, but it does a really great little job. I'm using 030 wire. Now 030 works well because it's a little bit more versatile, and if I'm going to weld up a muffler pipe, or I can even weld 1/4 inch with it if I have to. I'm using gas, I'm using an argon CO2 mix. And you can use CO2, it's a little bit cheaper. It does about the same type of a job. So anyway, when you're working with thin metal, the tendency for people is to turn their welder down. Now, try and avoid that, because if you get a cold weld, and you're basically just welding on top and you're not getting any penetration whatsoever, you grind that weld off, you no longer have a weld. So that's why I like it a little hot, so I get some penetration. That means that you've got to be a little bit more careful about what you're doing, but you'll learn. You'll figure that one out yourself. Best way to do it is just keep trying. Now, let's say you're throwing a panel together like this, and the first thing you got to do is tack it together. If you don't tack it, you're in trouble. I remember I was just a little kid, probably 8 years old, and my dad had me welding up this piece for the barbecue, and it was 2 halves, and I was using arc welder at the time. My dad always taught me how to do stuff, at an early age. And I'm sitting there welding away, and it's going really good, and I'm going, I don't need to tack it. By the time I got down to the end, big wide gap down here, now you gotta start all over again, cut it. It didn't work out very well. But that was a lesson learned for me, and I never did it again. So we're gonna tack this, and you just gotta make sure that you're flush. The worst thing you can do is tack it and have one up a little higher than the other. Usually I like to leave a little bit of a gap so I can get a small little screwdriver in there. So if one's a little higher, you can just tweak it over, give it a little tack, and you're good to go. Alright, let's give this a tack, and then I'll draw you a picture of what I do. Here's another thing that helps. If you're really serious about welding, get an auto shade. This is a really old helmet, and I picked up this auto shade. It's a solar one, 20 years ago. Still works great. Even though I've dropped it, it's got a bit of a break here. Man, bulletproof. Be careful what you buy though. Some of those other ones, you gotta have batteries, and if you're not using them, they wear out, and when you want to go use it, you don't have a welding mask. Alright, we're gonna get close, and we're just gonna give it a little shot, That way we're not hitting her hard right off the bat. We want to attack it. And that's all you want to do. Just put a little tack on there. Now, this can't spread apart. I'll put another tack down here, and then we can continue on welding. Okay, she's all tacked up. Now, when you're welding this stuff, what you want to do is you have to be patient. If I just started welding this is going to stretch and it'll be a heavy, heavy cup when it's all said and done. So usually what I do is I'll pick halfway, 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 and then let it cool. What you can do to help cool that is maybe a little bit of air. But what I've found too is that can be almost too much. In a sense where if you just weld it and then you cool it right away, then what ends up happening is it shrinks and then kind of does the same thing as stretching it, you know. So let it sit for just a little bit and then hit it with the air. So I'm just going to tack this again and then give you a couple more hints. Now if you look on the back here, you can see I've got penetration all the way through, and that's exactly what we want. Well, I made a couple welds. Camera wasn't rolling. Okay, we've got her tacked up. Now we want to start filling. Now you can go halfway if you're comfortable about doing that. But once you're there, it's not going to move very much on you. So I like to just start on the weld and let it puddle up, and you'll watch it. You have to watch your weld, and it'll puddle up and just kind of flow out. That is probably the best tip you can use for welding thin metal, because if you just keep welding hard, you know, where there is nothing, you can have a blow through. But you have a lot more success if you weld on the weld. And that's why that little extra heat helps you out a little bit, but it will save you from blowing holes. So we will continue here. I'll weld a couple more. Now, you've got to be able to put your hand on there if you want to continue welding. And if you can't, don't, because then you can start getting some warpage. Now, once I get started on my weld, you can just kind of move it just a little bit down, and you'll see it fill. I have got no burnout here at all. And I've got a fairly large gap. It's a fairly thin metal here. Works really good. And you get your penetration that you need. Remember, high heat, weld on the weld, you'll find some success. Alright, let's see if I'll show you what I do when you're in trouble. Alright. Now let's say you get yourself into some trouble, you're blowing yourself a hole, or you're actually going to weld a hole up. So let's say that that's our hole. Now, it won't be that big. My rule, about 1/2 inch is the maximum that I'll weld up for a hole, and that's really easy to do. Any bigger than that, I'd make up a little patch for it. So basically, when you're welding a hole up, you'd start just like tacking, and you get a little bead on the one spot, and then basically you just start welding on the weld, and then you just start filling in your hole. Just a little bit at a time, and you'd be surprised at how fast it fills up. But if you keep continuing and trying to just start on the edge, there's a good chance you're just going to blow this hole bigger. Remember, weld on the weld. You'll find some success. Now, let's say you're in real big trouble, and you're really having a bad day, and you just keep blowing things away. What I do is I'll take my gun, get her fairly close, and just pull the trigger, quick. Go zap. What'll happen is a little ball will form on the end of your wire. Just like that. And you'll see it. And then you can just come in and touch your welder again. That little ball will fill this spot up without throwing out a lot of energy blowing it out. So you can just take that little blob, just go, spread out and fill it up without burning a bigger hole. I don't know, I've never heard of anybody mentioning that before, but there are a lot of times, if you're on some really thin metal, that's all I'll do is I'll zap it, get a little ball, and then you fill it in, and it works like magic. It really does. Give it a try. So, remember, tack, weld on the weld, give it a couple seconds, make sure you got some good penetration, you'll watch it, it'll flow down. Or, if you're in trouble, put the little ball on the end of your wire, and you're going to find some success. Now, the best way to do this is just practice, practice, practice. It's like doing math. You just got to keep doing it. Metal's cheap, welding is good therapy, and when you find success, you have way more fun welding. Opens up a whole bunch more projects that you can do. I really hope that I've only given you a couple little hints. We're not using a TIG weld or anything like that, which would really help out a lot too. But if you're using just a little MIG welder, these little hints are going to help you out a lot. I hope you find success. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch up to you on the next one.